The sky turns black at noon. It is not a storm cloud blocking the sun. It is a living, vibrating blanket of wings. He calls it the Day of the Lord. Most people assume the Day of the Lord is a singular event waiting at the very end of human history. The earth is collapsing because human idolatry has made it too heavy to stand. The people worship the stars on their flat rooftops in the dark. They swear by the God of Israel and then immediately bow to a foreign king. They mix the holy and the profane until the boundaries of reality themselves dissolve. And so the Creator is dismantling the structure. Listen to the noise of the coming day. A cry rises from the fish gate. A wail echoes from the second quarter. A loud crash booms from the hills. Zephaniah says, God will search the dark cellars of Jerusalem with lamps. He will hunt down the men who sit in the dark, drinking thick, sweet wine, whispering that God will do nothing. The lamps will expose them. The light will burn them. Their hoarded silver will lie useless in the street. The walls will fall. The iron will rust. The gold will melt. The fortified cities will become piles of broken stone. Zephaniah calls it a day of wrath, a day of distress, a day of ruin, a day of clouds and thick darkness. He piles up the Hebrew words like heavy stones on a grave. There is nowhere to hide. The wealthy cannot buy their way out. The religious cannot pray their way out. The warriors cannot fight their way out. The universe is hitting the reset button. It is a terrifying vision of absolute zero, a complete wiping of the slate. But hidden in the rubble of these ancient prophecies, right next to the final cosmic wrap-up, the moment the skies roll back, the trumpets sound, and time simply stops, the falling towers and the darkened sun, is a strange and desperate response, a reaction that feels entirely out of place in the middle of an apocalypse. You sit in the blue glare of a phone screen at 2 a.m, scrolling through a timeline of human fracture. You see the concrete dust settling over broken neighborhoods. You hear the polished voices of men in tailored suits defending the indefensible. You feel the heavy, sinking knot in your stomach when the corrupt walk away with overflowing pockets and the vulnerable walk away with nothing. And somewhere, in the quiet dark of your room, a prayer forms in your jaw before you even realize you are speaking. Break this. Come down and fix this. Make it right. This is the modern echo of the ancient cry. If you have ever watched a system protect the guilty, you understand the tension of the prophets. If you have ever felt the cold, sterile air of a hospital room where a body fights a losing war against a broken world, or tasted the metallic bitterness of an injustice that the courts completely ignored, you know exactly why the Israelites originally sang for this day. When you are being crushed by the wheels of human empire, you do not ask God for a gentle course correction, and it does carry that ultimate, world-ending weight in the final pages of the New Testament. You ask Him to break the wheel. The Day of the Lord is not just a terrifying collapse. It is a desperate rescue. When the Creator dismantles the towering structures of human arrogance, the people trapped in the shadows of those towers finally see the sun. The falling walls of the ancient city are a nightmare to the kings who built them, but they are a jubilee to the captives locked inside, to the oppressed. The Day of the Lord is the beautiful, terrifying sound of the prison door coming off its hinges. But this desire for justice carries a hidden blade. We all want a God who cleanses the earth of evil, but none of us want a God who exposes the evil in our own closets. We want strict, uncompromising justice for our oppressors, but we demand infinite mercy for our own compromises. We want the Day of the Lord to be a swift scalpel that removes the cancer of the world, without realizing that our own hearts are carrying the disease. Because when you pray for God to arrive and burn away every trace of corruption from the earth, you are making a dangerous assumption. You are assuming you are holding the match and not standing in the dry brush. But if you look closer at how the ancient prophets actually deploy this exact phrase, at the very real, very historical disasters they are pointing to, you are assuming that the dividing line between good and evil runs neatly between you and your enemies. You are assuming the corruption is entirely external, living in the geopolitical systems, in the greedy corporations, in the people you despise. You want the judge to strike the heavy wooden gavel and condemn the darkness. But what happens when the judge turns around and his burning gaze lands on you? A man sits in a dark stone room. A charcoal fire roars in front of him. The heat presses against his face. He holds a heavy clay crucible over the coals. Inside the vessel, raw silver begins to melt. It turns a blinding, glowing orange in the dark. A thick, gray crust of impurity floats to the surface. The smell of sulfur and smoke fills the room. The man takes a long iron spoon. He scrapes the crust away. He watches. He waits. He leaves it in the flames. He will not pull the silver from the heat until he can see his own face perfectly reflected in the liquid metal. This is the final image of the Old Testament. You start to see something the end of the world reading completely misses. The day of the Lord is not a singular date on an eschatological calendar. The prophet Malachi stands before a deeply cynical generation. The Israelites are back from exile. They have rebuilt the temple, but they are bored. They are apathetic. They bring blind sheep and sick goats to the altar. They cheat the hired worker. They oppress the widow. They turn away the foreigner. They look at the corruption around them and ask a sneering question: where is the God of justice? Malachi answers them: the God of justice is coming. The day of the Lord is arriving. But Malachi does not point to an invading army. He does not summon a locust swarm. He points to the silversmith sweating in the dark room. But who can endure the day of his coming? And who can stand when he appears? For he is like a refiner's fire. The day of the Lord is not an annihilation. It is an extraction. The fire does not want to destroy the silver. The fire wants to destroy the dross. God is stepping into time to burn away the impurities that are rotting his people from the inside. The arrogance, the exploitation, the idolatry, the apathy. He is turning up the heat to separate the precious metal from the dirt. The heat rises. The metal boils. The crust forms. The spoon scrapes. It is an agonizing process. It is a repeating pattern of divine collision. From Joel's swarming locusts to Isaiah's falling empires, the people asking for justice have no idea what it will cost them to endure it. They thought the day of the Lord would be a courtroom where they sat comfortably on the jury. Malachi tells them they are the raw ore going into the furnace. The fire will burn away everything that is not meant to survive. It will cleanse the priesthood. It will purify the offerings. It will restore the heartbeat of the nation. But as the prophetic scrolls close, a terrifying paradox hangs in the air. A theological crisis that every prophet, from Amos to Malachi, has been quietly building toward, waiting for the pages of the New Testament to open. Because if the fire destroys the impurity, what happens when the impurity is woven into the very fabric of the soul? The Hebrew prophets built an impossible theological equation. They spent hundreds of years unrolling heavy, stiff animal skin parchments and pressing dark ink onto the surface to describe a God who is flawlessly just. A God who cannot simply ignore the bruised backs of the oppressed or turn a blind eye to the heavy, rigged scales in the marketplace. If God is good, he must eradicate evil. But here is the structural flaw in the human condition. From Obadiah's fallen mountains to Malachi's roaring furnace, the phrase rings through the Hebrew texts like a warning bell. The line between the oppressor and the oppressed does not run cleanly between ancient nations, but cuts straight through the center of every human chest. The problem of the prophets is not that they demand too much justice. It is that humanity has too little innocence to survive the verdict. If the day of the Lord means the absolute destruction of every corrupt system, every self-serving motive, and every deceitful whisper, then nobody gets to walk out of the courtroom. The heavy wooden gavel falls on everyone. The fire consumes the whole house. If God turns the full weight of his unshielded justice against the earth will shatter like a thin pane of glass hit by a solid iron hammer. The prophets knew this. They watched the blood of millions of lambs soak into the rough limestone of the Temple Mount. They smelled the thick, heavy smoke of atonement, rising every single morning and evening. And yet, the human heart remains stubbornly unchanged. A ritual can wash the skin, but it cannot rewire the desires. A priest can sprinkle blood on a bronze altar, but he cannot extract the idolatry from a living mind. This is the crisis of the day, of the Lord. It is a collision between an unstoppable force of purity and an immovable object of human rebellion. The fire of Malachi is not a metaphorical discomfort. It is the absolute, terrifying reality of divine holiness coming into direct contact with human compromise. And when those two things collide, the prophets were not using it merely to write a timeline of the distant future. They were using it to diagnose the immediate present. The compromise always burns. The ancient texts leave us suspended in this agonizing tension. They point to a necessary fire, but they also point to a God who repeatedly promises to rescue his people from the ashes. How does a holy judge destroy the cancer without killing the patient? How does the Creator dismantle the architecture of human sin while somehow preserving the humans trapped inside the building? The Old Testament prophets hand this explosive, unresolvable paradox to the first century. They roll up their heavy scrolls. The ink dries. They step off the stage into a deafening silence. And then, 400 years later, the sky turns black at noon again. But this time, the darkness does not fall on a corrupt city, and the judgment does not fall on a guilty nation. A swarm of locusts stripped the ancient vineyards to bear wood, and a prophet named it the judgment of God. An invading army shattered the thick stone walls of an empire, and God collapsed the arrogance of human kings. A shepherd interrupted a flawless temple festival and turned a national song of victory into a terrifying mirror. A watchman announced the absolute unmaking of creation itself and exposed the silver hoarded in the dark cellars of Jerusalem. They were naming the terrifying, beautiful moments when God steps into human history to collapse corrupt human systems. A captive prayed for the heavy wheel of injustice to break and realized the day of the Lord was a prison door coming off its hinges. A silversmith held a clay crucible in a roaring charcoal fire and promised to burn the dross to save the metal. And centuries later, the sky turned black at noon over a wooden cross, and the full, unshielded weight of the day of the Lord fell on the Creator himself. One phrase, one devastating rescue. But maybe the part that stays with me most is the man Amos described. The man who sprints across the hot dirt, escapes the jaws of the roaring lion, breaks away from the bear, and finally reaches the safety of his own home. He slams the heavy wooden door shut. He leans his exhausted, sweating hand against the cool clay wall in the dark, and the serpent bites him. It is the agonizing realization that human religion cannot build a room secure enough to keep out the justice of God. We cannot outrun the fire. We cannot bribe the judge. The prophets did not write these words to terrify us into hiding. They wrote them to strip away our false security so we would finally look for a real savior. To understand the true weight of this phrase, you have to unlearn how modern Christianity usually talks about prophecy. If you are in a season where you look at the corruption of the world and find yourself praying for the day of the Lord to arrive, but then you look at your own heart and realize how much of that same corruption lives in your own chest. If you are terrified of the refiner's fire because you know how much of your life is just dross, stop running from the lion. Stop hiding in the dark room. The entire message of the prophets was driving toward a Friday in Jerusalem, where the judge of the universe willingly stepped into his own furnace. The fire fell. The debt was absorbed. The metal was purified. And may the God who has never once compromised his justice to show his mercy walk with you through your own refining fire and bring you out, reflecting his image perfectly in the dark. The sound is deafening, like a wildfire crackling through dry mountain stubble, like 1,000 iron-wheeled chariots grinding over stone. You have to step out of the book of Revelation and walk backwards into the dust of the ancient Near East. Because before this phrase was a promise to the whole world, it was a threat to the people who thought they were safe. Modern readers often approach the biblical prophets as if they were holding a crystal ball, peering through the fog of thousands of years to write coded messages about the 21st century. We scan their poems for clues about modern geopolitics. We treat their ancient, ink-stained scrolls like a puzzle waiting to be unlocked by the evening news. But that is not how a prophet operates. A prophet is not a fortune teller. They are a covenant watchman. When these men stood in the stone city squares of Jerusalem or Samaria and shouted about the day of the Lord, they were not looking over the heads of their immediate audience to talk to us. They were looking their own kings and priests dead in the eye. The term eschatology usually conjures images of the final judgment, a cosmic wrapping up where history simply halts. And because we carry that modern definition, every time we see the phrase Day of the Lord in our English Bibles, our minds automatically leap forward. A farmer watches a year of labor vanish in 10 minutes. The olive trees are stripped to bare. White wood. We picture apocalyptic fire falling from a torn sky. We imagine the final collapse of the physical universe. But the prophets used the phrase differently. The day of the Lord is not the end of time. It is a divine intrusion into time. When Isaiah uses the phrase in his 13th chapter, he is not talking about the end of the world. He is talking about the very historical, very geopolitical destruction of Babylon by the Medes. The empires will clash. The thick city walls will shatter. And Isaiah calls that violent military invasion the day of the Lord. When Ezekiel uses the phrase in chapter 30, he is not describing a future apocalypse. He is describing the impending fall of Egypt to the Babylonian army. A historical king marches his soldiers across the hot sand. Bronze swords are drawn. Blood soaks into the dirt. And Ezekiel labels this violent shift in ancient geopolitics the day of the Lord. God uses the natural and historical forces of the world to bring down human arrogance. A swarm of locusts, a foreign army, a collapsing economy. Whenever human evil reaches a tipping point, whenever systemic injustice grows so heavy that the fabric of creation can no longer sustain it, the grapevines are chewed down to the roots. The fig trees are ruined. The pomegranate dries up. The apple tree withers. God steps in and allows the structure to collapse under its own weight. That collapse is the day. It is a day of reckoning, a day of decreation. And the terrifying reality of this pattern is that it means the day of the Lord has already happened multiple times in history. It is a recurring cycle. The final, ultimate day of the Lord at the end of the age is simply the macro fulfillment of a micro pattern that has been spinning since the Garden of Eden. If you understand this cycle, you realize why the prophets were so deeply frustrated with the religious people of their generation. The ancient Israelites actually loved the idea of the day of the Lord. They sang about it while the smell of roasting lamb drifted over the temple courts. They prayed for it to arrive. They believed it would be a day of national vindication, a moment when God would finally smash their pagan enemies and elevate Israel to global supremacy. They thought they were on the right side of history simply by virtue of their bloodline and their rituals. They were waiting for a celebration, but in the 8th century BC, the air smells of dry dust and crushed insects. The ground itself is crawling. This is the opening scene of the Book of Joel. A shepherd from the southern hills walked into the affluent northern kingdom and turned their favorite theological concept into a weapon. The smoke of the morning sacrifice rises over the altar at Bethel. The air smells of charred lamb and expensive incense. The temple musicians pluck a bright, rhythmic tempo on their harps. The elites of the northern kingdom recline on couches inlaid with carved ivory, drinking sweet wine from heavy silver bowls, their skin shining with imported oils. They are wealthy. They are comfortable. They are exquisitely religious. And they are eagerly waiting for the day of the Lord. Amos stands in the middle of their festival. He is not a polished priest in embroidered linen. He is a herdsman from the harsh southern hills, a man whose hands are rough from bruising sycamore figs. He looks at their beautiful, seamless worship. He looks at the poor they trampled and the courts they bribed to afford it. He opens his mouth, and the festival shatters. Woe to you who desire the day of the Lord. The music stops. The silver bowls are lowered. The crowd stares at the dirt-stained prophet. Amos does not soften his voice. Why would you have the day of the Lord? It is darkness and not light. This is the Great Reversal, the ultimate theological shockwave. Amos takes their favorite song and turns it into a funeral dirge. They wait for a sunrise. He promises an eclipse, a plague so absolute it stops the ancient world in its tracks. The regional economy collapses. The food supply vanishes overnight. They expect a crown. He announces a sword. They sing for a rescue. He prophesies a trap. Amos paints a picture of inescapable dread. A man sprints across the hot dirt, his chest heaving, running for his life from a roaring lion. He survives. He escapes the jaws. But as he rounds the corner, a bear rises up from the brush to crush him. He breaks away, bleeding, terrified, and finally reaches his home. He slams the heavy wooden door shut. He leans, his exhausted, sweating hand against the cool clay wall in the dark, and a serpent bites him. No escape, no sanctuary. The day of the Lord is not a victory parade for the religious. It is a terrifying mirror for the corrupt. The Israelites thought that because they knew the right songs, because they sacrificed the right animals, they were completely exempt from God's justice. They assumed God would only judge the pagan nations outside their borders. Amos tells them the border means nothing. God is not bound by their religious resume. He is bound by his own holy character. The people who exploit the vulnerable cannot hide behind a hymn. The leaders who crush the poor cannot buy safety with a burnt offering. The day is coming for them. 2. But to truly feel the terror of what Amos is declaring, you have to look past the English translation of this moment. Even the daily temple sacrifices in Jerusalem cease, because there is simply no grain or wine left to offer on the altar. You have to look at the specific ancient vocabulary he hurls into that silent, stunned courtyard, because the phrase itself holds a tension that English simply cannot capture. Amos chapter 5, verse 18. The prophet stands before a crowd expecting a national victory, and instead, he weaponizes their own religious vocabulary against them. When you trace his words back to the rough ink of an ancient parchment scroll, the phrase our English Bibles translate as the day of the Lord is the Hebrew Yom Yahweh. It appears dozens of times across the prophetic books, and its linguistic weight is heavier than a simple time reference. The noun form, Yom, is translated as day, but it rarely means a strict 24-hour cycle when used in this prophetic context. It means a specific epoch, a bounded era of action, a moment in time defined entirely by the event that happens within it, and it is tied directly to Yahweh the Holy, covenant name of God, spoken with breathy, heavy consonants. To the ancient Hebrew mind, the human empires all had their own days. The day of Egypt, the day of Assyria, the day of Babylon. These were eras where human kings sat on elevated thrones, squeezed tribute from the poor, and dictated the rhythm of history. Yom Yahweh is the violent, sudden interruption of that rhythm. The rhythm of worship is broken by starvation. Joel looks out at this devastated, chewed-up landscape. It is the moment the Creator steps back into the room and strips the crown from the human king. If feeling the weight of these original Hebrew phrases is changing how you read the prophets, you're exactly who this channel is for. Drop a thought in the comments and hit subscribe, because every week we go deeper into the text than you knew was possible. So the prophet Isaiah takes this exact phrase and aims it at the pride of the world. Isaiah chapter 2 warns that Yom Yahweh will come against everyone who is proud and lofty. He lists the highest, strongest things in the ancient world: the towering cedars of Lebanon, the oaks of Bashan, the high mountains, the fortified walls, and the beautiful trading ships on the sea. The tall towers of human achievement will shatter like clay pots hitting a stone floor. No human fortification can withstand the gravity of God's direct presence. That root meaning changes everything. When the prophets warn of this day, they are not talking about a random apocalyptic horror. The day of the Lord is not an expiration date for the physical universe. It is an eviction notice for human corruption. It is the moment God finally says enough and systematically dismantles the structures built on violence and greed. But if Amos used this phrase to terrify, he watches the weeping priests in sackcloth. He points to the bare branches, and he gives this present. Physical catastrophe, a specific name, one local kingdom. A few decades later, another prophet would take the exact same words and use them to unravel the entire fabric of creation. A wind blows backward through time. The water covers the dry land. The birds fall from the sky. The fish disappear from the Black Sea. The beasts of the field vanish into dust. The prophet Zephaniah walks through the narrow, crowded streets of Jerusalem. It is the 7th century BC. King Josiah sits on the throne. The city smells of burning incense and fresh blood from the morning sacrifices. The merchants shout over the clinking of heavy silver weights. The priests chant their ancient prayers. Zephaniah does not look at the market. He looks at the fabric of the universe pulling apart at the seams. He speaks. And his words undo the book of Genesis. I will utterly sweep away everything from the face of the earth. A declares, God is speaking through him. God is reeling the tape of creation backward. In Genesis, God separates the waters. He fills the sky with wings. He fills the sea with scales. He forms humanity from the wet clay. He calls it good. In Zephaniah, the order reverses. The humans are swept away. The beasts fall. The birds drop. The fish vanish. The day of the Lord is not just a localized military defeat. It is an act of cosmic decreation,